So, you're already finding patterns in point of view. Good job, you're moving right along. When you look at patterns that emerge from the text, we see an even bigger point of view than you would see in a close read. In order to find patterns for point of view, it is best to look at chunks of text rather than the whole text. So for the remainder of this chapter, as we analyze the point of view, keep that in mind that you want to look at chunks of the text. That would be a couple paragraphs as opposed to the entire chapter or the entire text. There are three types of patterns you will look for when analyzing point of view. The first pattern is which points of view or ideas are repeated. This one is easy to find. The second is what technique does the author use to make his or her point of view or argument. This is not so easy. And the third is what sticks out as different or unusual in the text. That one's also fairly simple to find. Remember, these are not the actual patterns, just the types. So let me show you what I mean. So the first type of pattern we're going to look for is repeated ideas. So if we look just at the chunks of the text, those that we've already highlighted or underlined, and we look for a pattern, we might find some ideas emerge. Let's see. So if you look at what I've circled, I found a couple of repeated ideas on the topic of performance in sports, and I could even elaborate and say that they all also include the idea of perception and how elite athletes perceive the field or perceive the game or the ball differently than novice or new athletes. So my pattern wouldn't be called repeated ideas, my pattern would be called performance or perception. Next, we're going to look at how you can find techniques. Okay, so when we look at technique, it gets a little tough. There are three main ways in which an author attempts to make his point of view or argument appeal to the reader. The first is the logical appeal, which is also called logos. This refers to when the author uses logical information, things that just make sense. They can be facts, data, anecdotes, testimonials, or assertions. Any of these types of appeals will help to support and prove his claim. This is a very common technique that authors use. Another common technique is the emotional appeal, also called pathos. This is when the author uses emotional tactics, when they may refer to sad events or say something to make you feel sympathy, guilt, fear, and thus draw you into what they're saying or what they're trying to convince you. There are tons of emotions. There's a long list there: greed, love, fear, acceptance, and on and on. Any emotion could be touched on by an author. The last type is called ethos, and this is considered or called an ethical appeal. This refers to when the author builds trust with you, the reader, by presenting themselves as an expert. In this case, they may provide some credentials of theirs to sort of prove that they know what they're talking about. Or they may use a certain tone in their writing to try to get you feel like you're reading something from your friend and you can trust them. They also will maybe use words or say things to suggest that they're experienced in the situation that they're talking about and they understand you and they're on your side. So we're going to look at the same couple paragraphs to see where our author, Epstein, has used these three techniques. You'll see my examples. You can highlight and identify them in your own text and then look for them in the remainder of chapter 1. So here you see I didn't even highlight because there were so many logical appeals. You can see that nearly these paragraphs here, in here, we have a lot of logical appeals. Anywhere that the author is giving data, facts, all right, something you really can't argue with. It's true and it's logically making sense and supporting his argument. I highlighted them or marked them in orange. You can see there, I only found one example of an emotional appeal that I colored blue when Stark says, "That's a very difficult task for people who don't know volleyball. In 16 milliseconds, all they see is a flash of light." So I think that the author here is trying to really kind of get you to feel like this is awesome, these players, that's amazing. Maybe have that sense or emotion of amazement, excitement, disbelief, that sort of thing. Lastly, I found a few examples of an ethical appeal. I highlighted them in pink. Here at the beginning, we get all of Janet Stark's credentials, where she went to school, what her background is in sports, and down here we see some more of that information. We see that she began helping the Canadian national field hockey team. So the author's trying to prove to us that this is someone that we should listen to and we can trust them. They really know what they're talking about. Okay, the last pattern, again, not that hard, is when you look for things that are different or unusual. Here, you can go again, look at the chunks of text where you've already highlighted and underlined, and this time look for things, basically the opposite of what you did with the first one, that don't seem to fit in. Something that doesn't really match, and see if there's anything left out. Sometimes it may not have any impact or influence and it just happens to be hanging out there, but other times there's a reason why there's something mentioned that doesn't quite connect, okay? Using your Finding Patterns graphic organizer, go through that second part of chapter 1 that you read and see if you can find some patterns. Of course, you can use the Reading Through the Lenses graphic organizer that you've already completed as well. Key thing here, because you do have a couple pages left of chapter 1 to look at, is to find chunks. And of course, look at those parts that were really interesting to you, or if you have pages that have more highlighting or underlining on them, that's going to make this task easier. All right, good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.